Hey guys, welcome back. In the last video, we went ahead and we did quite a bit. We set up our React application inside of our client source folder. We set up the router, the version 4 router, which is a little complicated. We also created a few components, our main component, which has the router, all the routes in it, the navbar component, the meetups component, and the about component. All right, now one thing I forgot to do is add the about to the sidebar here. I wanted to put that link. So let's do that real quick. We're going to go to, let's see, navbar.js and go down to where we have our side nav. And let's copy one of these LIs here. And we'll paste that in. And this is going to be about. It's going to go to /about. And for the icon here, we'll do, let's do question. I think it's question circle. Let's try that. Yeah, there we go. So now we have our about page. All right, good. So now what we're going to do is open up our meetups component because we want to fetch the meetups from the back end. Now we're going to need some kind of HTTP client to do this. Space that out. And we're going to use something called Axios, which is a really nice lightweight HTTP client to make GET requests, POST requests, put, patch, delete, all that stuff. So we're going to need to install that. So I'm going to go down here into the terminal, stop the server for a second, and do npm install Axios -- save. Okay, while that's going on, we'll just go ahead and bring it in up here. All right, and we'll start the server back up with npm start. It's going to open a new tab. Okay. Now, when we get the meetups, we want to store them in state so that we can access it throughout our component. We're also going to have a MeetupItem component, which will represent each individual meetup that's listed here. And then we'll pass the state, or we'll pass, we're going to loop through the meetups in the state and then pass them in as a property into those components. But we'll worry about that later. For now, what we're going to do is create a constructor. So we're going to go up to the top of the class here and say constructor. Okay, so we have to call this super method here because we're extending a component and we want to call that component's constructor as well. And that's what we do with super. And then we're going to set some state. So we'll say this.state equals, and all it is just an object. Inside here, we're going to have a value or a key called meetups, and we're going to initially just set it to an empty array. So the reason I'm doing this is because in order to get our meetups, we need to make a request using Axios. We need to make a request to LoopBack, to our backend, to this get route right here. Basically, we want to mimic what we're doing right here in React. So we're going to set this blank at first, and then we're going to create a function or a method called getMeetups. Okay, and this is where we're going to use Axios. So we're going to take Axios and we're going to say .get because we're making a get request. Actually, I don't want that semicolon. And then we want to put the route that we want to make the request to. Now remember, with LoopBack, we can make our request to localhost 3000 /API/meetups. That gives us all of our meetups. So that's what we want to put inside of here. All right. Now, the way that Axios works is it returns a promise, something called a promise. And to get that, we need to use .then. Okay. So inside this .then, we're going to pass in another set of, actually, we only have one parameter, so we don't need the parentheses. So we'll just say response, and then we're going to set that to an arrow function. And inside here, we should be able to get the response. All right. Now, if I go ahead and save this, nothing's going to happen. You'll see if I open my console, we're not getting a response because all we've done is create this function. It's not running. In order to run it, we need to put it inside of a lifecycle method. All right, so React components have what's called a lifecycle method. They're basically methods that fire off at certain points. Render is actually one of them, and that's the one that's actually required. The one that we want to use is called component will mount. All right, and this actually fires off at a certain point when the component mounts. And just to show you that, just to prove that to you, let's say console log 123 and save. And now when the component renders, you'll see we get 1, 2, 3. So this fires off automatically. So what we want to do is we want to call this.getMeetups and run it. Let's save. And there we go. Now we're getting our response, and this is what it gives us. Now, the way that this promise works that's returned from Axios is it puts the data inside of this data object right here. And you can see if we look at 0, that's the Angular meetup. 1 is the React meetup. So instead of using just response, we want to use response.data. So if we run that again, now you'll see we just get the array. All right, now what we want to do is take this response data, this array of objects, and put it inside of the meetups inside of the state. So to do that, we can say this.setState. Inside here, we just want to put our object. We want to say what part of the state do we want to update, and that's going to be the meetups. And we want to set it to the response.data. Okay, and then this can actually take a callback function. So I'm going to put a comma here, and then just put an arrow. We'll use an arrow function, and then we can console.log, whoops, and let's see what's in the state. So we can say this.state. And what should happen is we should now see the meetups inside of the state. So let's save, let's let it run. And there we go. Now if we look here, you'll see inside the state object, we have meetups with an array with our 2 objects. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to comment the console log out because we don't need that. But now that it's in the state, we should be able to access it down here in the render function. Now, since this is an array, what we need to do is we need a way to iterate through these meetups and then output them one by one. So what we'll do is go above the return, inside the render, but above the return, and we're going to create a variable called MeetupItems. Okay, and we're going to set this to this.state.meetups. Remember, we can access the meetups from here, and we want to just basically map through them. So we're going to use a method called map, and then inside here we're going to put a set of parentheses and say meetup, comma, and then an index or I. And then outside of this first parentheses, we're going to put an arrow, set it to a set of parentheses, and then in here we're going to put a return. And let's return for each one an li. And in here we can actually say, or I'm used to Angular, so I put 2, but React is just one set of curly braces. And we can access meetup because that's what we put right here. We could have put anything here. And then we can access any property of the meetup. So if we look at LoopBack, we can access the name, city, address, or ID. So let's get the name. We'll say .name. Okay. Now this alone, if I were to save, you'll see that nothing's happening. It actually says meetup items is assigned but never used. So what we want to do is go down here into the actual return of the render, and let's put in a UL, and then put in the variable meetup items and save. And there they are. Now we're going to get this message that says each child in the array should have a unique key property. Don't worry about that. We're going to get into that in just a bit. but you can see that we're now getting the meetups. All right, now I want this to look a little better. Materialize has something called a collection, so you can make unordered lists look better by adding a couple classes. So for the UL, we're going to add a class name. Look at that, I remembered. Class name of collection. And then the list items need to have a class of collection items. All right, we'll save that. I'm sorry, collection item, singular. And there we go. All right, cool. So now what we want to do is we want to make each one of these an actual component called MeetupItem instead of just rendering an LI like this. So let's create a new component over here, new file and components called MeetupItem.js. Okay, and then let's see. We're going to use the same format, extends component. I guess we'll just type it out real quick. So we'll say import React. We also want component from React. We're also going to want to bring in link from the router. And then we want our class called MeetupItem, which will extends component. Make sure we export it. All right, and then in here, let's put in our render. And we're going to render, let's say, return. And what we want to return is this right here. So let's go ahead and copy that. Actually, we'll cut it. Paste that in. Now this here, I'm going to get rid of this for now. What we need to do when we embed this MeetupItem component here, we need to pass in the state. We need to pass in the current meetup right here as a property, because you can pass in properties to components. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in that MeetupItem component inside the meetups.js by just importing MeetupItem, and let's see, yeah, MeetupItem from /MeetupItem, and then down here where we had the LI, we're going to use the component MeetupItem. All right, now it's not going to know what item to display. We need to pass it in as a property. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take, we'll call it item. We can call the property whatever we want, and we're going to just pass in meetup, which comes from here. Okay, same thing we were using in the LI. We're going to just pass in the entire meetup. Now, remember that message about having a key with a unique value? Well, that's where what we're gonna add right here. We're gonna say key equals, and we're gonna set up to the unique value of the meetup ID. So we can say meetup.id, because remember, each meetup, if we look at LoopBack, each one has a unique ID. So that's what we're passing in for the key. All right. So now we have access to this item from within the MeetupItem component. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's go back to MeetupItems. Right now it's going to break because we're not finished. All right, now that's getting passed in as a property. What I want to do is take the property, that meetup property, and add it as state inside of the MeetupItem component. All right, so what we'll do is put a constructor. Now, when you're passing in properties to a component, you have to add it here as props, and then also call the super method just like we did in Meetups, except we want to pass in props here as well. And then we want to say this dot state equals, and let's call this item. Now it was passed in as item as well right here. So that's how we can access it. And we can say props dot item. All right. So now down here we can access it as this dot state dot item because we added it as state up here. So right here we'll put in some curly braces and say this dot state dot item, and we want the name, so we'll say dot name. And let's save it and hope it works, and there we go. So now each one of these is actually its own component. It's a meetup item component. Now right here you'll see link is defined but never used. That's because we defined it here but we haven't used it. What we're going to do with it is wrap it around, or we're not around, but inside the LI, because we want each one of these to go to a details page for each meetup. So let's go down here and put in link to. Okay, let's put the ending tag here. And then where this is going to go, I'm actually going to, instead of using double quotes here, we're going to use curly braces. And I'm going to use a template string, which is part of ES6. So a template string, instead of using single quotes, we can use backticks. Backtick is the key to the left of the number 1. And then in here, we're going to say slash meetups slash, and then we want the ID. Okay, we want the ID of the meetup. Now to put a variable inside of a template string, you need to wrap it in money sign and then curly braces like that. And then we can put in this dot state dot item dot ID. Okay, because that'll give us the ID. So let's save it. And now you'll see we have a link. If I click, it goes to meetups slash and then the actual ID of the meetup. Now we don't have anything displayed down here yet, because what we need to do is create a meetup details component and then add that to the routes, and we're going to add it to a route like this so that we get the details component. All right, so let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go into components and create a new file called meetupdetails.js. Okay, and let's just copy. Let's see, I'm going to copy what we have in MeetupItem because that's a pretty simple component. We'll grab everything there. We'll put it in the meetup details. We are going to need Axios in here, so I'm going to import that because we need to make another request to get the single meetup. And we'll change the class name to MeetupDetails. For the constructor, we're going to need the props. That's fine. Now for the state, instead of having an item, we're going to have details, which will be set to nothing at first. All right, and then in the render, let's see, we're going to get rid of the LI. We don't want that. For now, let's just put a div. Okay, we'll put a div, and we'll just put an H1, and we'll just say details just for now. All right, and then make sure that you export the right thing, which should be meetup details, and save. All right, so now we have this route, this component. Now we need to create a route for it. So let's go to our main.js where we have all of our routes, and we're going to add a new route, and we'll say exact path equals. Okay, and the path for this is going to be slash meetups slash colon ID. All right, and then we want to set the component equal to meetup details. And we need to end that. All right, now meetup details has not been brought in yet, so we need to go up here and say import meetup details from /meetup details. All right, so now if we save that, we go back over here, and we click on one of these, it'll bring us to that details component, which right now doesn't have anything in it except an H1. But the point is that it is working. All right, and we should probably put a back button up here so we don't have to go back to like the menu here or click up here. So let's do that real quick inside the details. So above the H1, let's put a button, or not a button, but a link. We'll say link to say back, and that'll be to slash, and then we'll give it a class name of BTN, and let's give it a name of gray. I think we can do it like that, or GREY, sorry. All right, and let's just put a line break above it just to move it down. Whoop. In JSX, you need to have your closing slash like that. All right, so now we have a back button. So now our goal is to get the single meetup and put that info inside here. Now for that, we're going to use Axios. We're going to make another request to API/meetups and then slash the ID. So if I grab this ID right here and we say slash, you'll see it'll get the single meetup. So that's what we want to do. So we're gonna, it's the same idea as what we did in the meetups component. We'll create a function. We'll call it get meetup singular. And let's copy what we have in the meetups component for Axios, which is this. Oh, you know, one thing we should do here is add on a catch in case there's any errors. When you get a promise back, when you use .then, you can also say .catch and then pass in error, and then we'll just say console.log error. All right, and then we'll copy this, copy that, and put that in details, except we want to say right here, instead of making it to, you know, all the meetups, we want a specific one. Now I'm going to use backticks here instead of quotes because I want to put in a variable. Okay, it's going to be meetup slash and then the ID. So the ID we can get from the parameters. When you use the router and you have a parameter like we have here, like we do this ID, you can get it with inside this .props.match.params and then whatever this is, in this case ID. So let me just go back to details. What I'll do is actually create a variable right here. So we'll say let meetup ID equals this .props.match.params.id, and that should give us the ID from the URL. And then we're just going to put it in here. And remember, with a template string or template literal, whatever you want to call this, if you want to use a variable, you need to use this syntax. So we'll put in here meetup ID. Okay, we're going to get our response. Let's uncomment the console log of the state. Now, this is not going to be called automatically. We need to put this inside of component will mount, just like we did before. We'll say this .get meetup. Let's save it, let it reload. And down here, you can see we have our, oh, you know what? This should be details, because we're taking this details in the state and we're filling that. So let's reload, and now we have our details. And if we look inside there, we have the actual meetup details, which we should now be able to put inside of the render. So let's go down here to the render, and we're going to put an H inside the H1. Instead of just saying details, we're going to put this .state.details.name. All right, let's let it reload. And now we have the name. If we go to React Meetup, we get the name. Under that, we're going to have a UL. Let's give it a class name of collection. And inside here, let's put an li, give that a class name of collection item. And then this is going to be the city, which we can get with this dot state dot details dot city. And then we'll do the same thing with the address. All right, let's test that out. And there we go. All right, so now on the details page, we also want to have an edit and delete link. I'm not going to get into that functionality in this video. That's going to be in the next one, but I want to add the buttons. So let's go under the UL and let's put in a link to link to, and that's going to go to /meetups/edit/ and then the ID. Okay, actually I wanted to use curly brace here with backticks. All right, and then in here we can put the variable, and we can get the ID with this dot state dot details dot ID. Okay, and then here we'll say edit, and let's give this link a class name of BTN. Yeah, just BTN. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so there's our edit button, and then we're going to have our delete. Let's see, so the delete is actually going to be not a link but a button, because it's going to be a button with an event that we're going to call inside of this component that's going to delete it. All right, so let's go down here and let's say button. We'll give it a class name of BTN, and let's do BTN dash, no, not BTN dash. Let's give it a class of red since it's a delete, and let's also align it to the right. Okay, and then over here we'll say delete. And then what's going to happen is we're going to add an event here, but I'm not going to do that just yet. So let's just save it. I just want to get the button shown. All right, so now we have edit and delete. So we're going to stop here. Now that we have all of our meetups getting fetched, we have each one inside of a meetup item component. If we click that, it takes us to the meetup details component where we're fetching the single meetup data. The UI looks pretty good. So in the next video, we're going to have this button go to an add form so that we can actually add meetups through our application. We'll make a post request using Axios, and we'll go from there. So thanks guys for watching. Please leave a like, please subscribe if you're not, and I will see you in the next one. Hey guys, if you've been watching my videos for a while and you really like what I do and I've helped you out a lot, consider becoming a patron. Even for $1 per month, it pushes me to keep bringing you guys the best content I possibly can. There's reward tiers for discounts, free Udemy courses, personal support, and more. So check out the Patreon link in the description below for more info.